You know, sometimes people say something like, oh, the original Black Costume Saga didn't make Peter angry. I wish they had updated the original version sometime. I personally have said this many times. I actually agree with it. But there is something very important that statement leaves out. Not maliciously, but it can misinform very easily if you don't know any better. The original Black Costume Saga does coincide with Peter's anger arc. It just happens independently from the symbiote. It's caused by everything else happening around Spider-Man. Spider-Man was pushed to the brink, to the point he chooses to give up and let people get hurt as he decides it's not his problem anymore, directly breaking his vow to protect people. I've joked about Spider-Man killing his enemies before with Gog and Carrion, but this era includes Spider-Man's first canonical kill. The symbiote is gone, but Peter gets a cloth replacement for the black costume, so the imagery of a black Spider-Man combined with Peter's anger are tied together, even in the original comics. This era is very important to the mythos, as it does of course include probably the most iconic alternative costume in comics, but it also is important to Spider-Man's cast, as it takes Flash, MJ, and it really either makes them or breaks them, depending on who you ask. And even with villains, this is the era where Hobgoblin, one of Spider-Man's greatest villains, falls apart and begins his sad, pathetic fate to obscurity. And today, I want to explore this era. This era of Amazing Spider-Man is written by Tom DeFalco and the lead artist is Ron Frenz. Spectacular Spider-Man is run by Peter David with various artists, and then there's an entirely new book joining the club, Web of Spider-Man, which is constantly changing writers and artists. All in all, I read 41 issues of Amazing Spider-Man, 41 issues of Spectacular, 33 issues of Web of, 7 issues of Annuals, and I read Spider-Man vs. Wolverine one-shot, plus there might be a Secret Wars in there somewhere, or two. Overall, that's about 123 issues for this era, give or take. Getting this video done was a long and complicated process, and I hope you enjoy the fruits of my labor. So, without further ado, let's look at how this group of writers bring Spider-Man into the modern, dark age of comics and how it ultimately falls apart. In the alien costume video, I joked that this era gets real. Yeah, it gets even realer here. That's the biggest contribution I think this era brings. This era takes Spider-Man and adds a level of realism to the character. These stories get darker and more serious. There's greater ambition running through the comics. The best way I think I can sum up this era, it feels like some people read Miller's Daredevil and just decided to try that. This era happens during the mid-80s, during the run Dark Knight Returns would release, heralding in a new era of comics. An age of adult comics, and Spider-Man is clearly reacting to the modern landscape. Not because of Dark Knight Returns necessarily, this transition was long and happened over a long period of time. The comic book industry had already been moving towards more adult-oriented stories for a while, and now, this era we finally arrived here, ending the Bronze Age. Seriously, it's a crime Marvel hasn't gotten around to release an Omni for this run. You will miss crucial character development and some of the very best stories to ever come out of the character if you don't read this run. Please Marvel, I'm begging you here, please release this. In order to show this, I want to jump over to the spin-off book first, Spectacular Spider-Man, which is at this time essentially equally important to the main book, issues 107 through 1010. This story begins by giving us Jean DeWolf's thoughts on her life. She recalls on how her father was a misogynist who wanted a son. She took this to heart. Rejected by her father, she would go on to try and find that love from her stepfather, who was a cop. He loved her and she loved him. She took to the police life. She wanted to make him proud. She became the best cop. In a male-dominated field, she had to work harder than everybody else. She had to be tougher and smarter. So she was. She never let anybody get the idea that she made her way through nepotism or something. The Wolf became a police captain, and she's gonna make her stepfather proud by becoming the first female police commissioner. And then, we see police rush into her apartment. Huh. Wonder I was thinking about that just now. She thinks her last thought, and the police find her dead on her bed. Death of Jean DeWolf is one of the best Spider-Man stories of all time, like easily. It's genuinely a 10 out of 10 story. It's one of the only Spider-Man stories of all time to capture the true horror of murder. It's a story that has a level of sophistication to its storytelling that very few Spider-Man stories ever have had before and after. And I'd argue even modern stories lack the kind of ambition this story has. The art is incredible. The atmosphere is haunting. Seeing the wolf's life flash before her eyes is just nasty. The shot of her eyes has been stuck in my mind since reading this. The story deals with price of heroism, vigilantes, justice, hatred of women. It's juggling a lot of these ideas, and for most part, it absolutely nails them. It's an incredible story. Devil Genius Wolf is easily one of the best things to come out of Spider-Man, but it's at the same time a little bit frustrating, and I think that's really what makes the story so interesting, as it's another female character thrown away. Gwen Stacy was a great character whose potential was never utilized properly. Betty Brant is an interesting character, but she's only ever used to give the men a source of drama. Aunt May has become kinda annoying by this point, I'll be honest. Even my beloved MJ didn't get full exploration until DeFalco came along. The Wolves is one of the best female characters in the series, one of the few to escape the curse of female characters, until now. It caught up to her and she's killed off permanently, which is of course intentional. Like I said, the story captures the horror of murder by destroying all the potential she had. You really feel it's brutal, but it is very effective. So, really, it's a question if the potential of the character matters more than a single story. Had the wolf lived, she would have ended up written just like the other characters. She probably would have been crushed by the editorial at some point. She had a crush on Spider-Man, which I believe would have eventually turned into a terrible storyline under other writers. Maybe her death is the best outcome for the character. Would future writers have done anything great with her? This way, at least she gets to be part of an all-time classic, even if she only appears on a single panel. I don't know, well, I criticize the Wolf's treatment, but we do get a Silver Sable in this run, and she's super cool and gets to do some real action. In fact, this era has quite a few great female characters. There's Joy and the chick from the one story where she takes a pic of some dude's body. This era does give us female characters with agency and personality, which is great, I love it. But they do get overpowered weird amounts in this run, like they're given the agency, but then immediately robbed of it with assaults and shotgun blasts. Like, I would be super curious, let me know what you think about the death of Genius Wolf. This is by far the darkest story for the character up to this point, and sets the tone for what this era is like. This has been a steady evolution for a long time. I've been commenting on the tone through my videos, and I feel like this story sets a milestone for the character. We're now in the darker era where all the bets are off, and I don't think we can ever walk this back. I don't really usually associate Spider-Man with darkness, it's just not his thing, you know? If I read Spider-Man and I'm left feeling bad by the end, that's usually a sign you've kind of gone wrong somewhere. This is one of the darkest eras, and honestly, it kind of works here. It's a little tired to have another run that brings Peter's life down all around him, but hey, at least he's not alone with the misery this time. Other people's lives get ruined too. Take that, supporting cast members. Peter's relationship with Black Cat falls apart. Peter spends a good chunk of the run not speaking to Aunt May. Nate is sent to the hospital. He's Aunt May's boyfriend, don't worry about it. Peter's apartment gets torched. The Wolf gets the female character special. There is a scene where Black Cat gets assaulted, but I'm not sure how far I'm supposed to read into it, but it definitely has a certain tone, at least comes across that way to me. She's completely powerless, bruised, and refuses to talk about it. There's another scene somewhere amidst these 100 issues, which I'm not looking for, where another woman is assaulted, and it's kind of eerie. Maybe I'm reading too much into it and that's just me, but the assault is such a specific word to use to describe what happens to these women. And in this run, Sin Eater, who openly arms women because he wants to with that, I don't think the assault or undertones are necessarily a coincidence, and that's just super disturbing. It's really dark, even if it doesn't take effect in any kind of practical terms. It's just an implication, I believe, but still, it is a whole nother level. But even with that, the worst happens, I believe, to my boy Flash, because what happens to him is actually concrete. Flash spirals down harder than anyone else here. He used to be the big man in high school, all the girls wanted him, he could bully the boys as he pleased, but then he got out of there, and life wasn't so glorious, so he went to Vietnam seeking purpose. That shadows him everywhere. He lost his purpose. He grew insecure about his life. He needs to be somebody. He needs to feel great. He begins to grow kind of angry as he tries to relive his glory days by playing football again. And it's kind of sad to look at. He starts to resent Peter again. He grows resentful of his girlfriend, Shashan. He becomes closed off and he even cheats on her. And eventually he even slaps Shashan. She slaps him back later in an argument. And somehow things get even worse from there. He gets framed as the Hobgoblin in a fake-out identity reveal. And that's what 6 fake-out for the guy. Like, come on guys, you can keep doing this. Seeing Flash slap his girlfriend is extremely shocking. I'll be honest, I'm not sure if I like it or not, because I love Flash's character development up to this point, but it is interesting, and I feel like I kind of buy it. It goes far enough to be consequential, and he uses Flash's real history to make it, I don't know, him. There is one scene that bothers me, and I will probably never get an opportunity to talk about the sloppiness of some random issue from the 80s, so I will take the opportunity here. I can't find the scene because there's like 100 of these things, but there's a scene where Flash explains the reason he believed Peter is because Peter was a weirdo in school, so Peter's partially at fault, which is 100% messed up and incorrect. Peter had a chip on his shoulder, sure, but bro, you were chasing Peter in the streets. What do you mean it's also Peter's fault? You broke his classes that he, needs to see. But he didn't talk to you, so it's the same? Like, get out of here. Like, this is like genuine gaslighting. You beat you up, Peter? No, you're crazy. You made me do it, Peter. Chasing you wasn't bullying. All those physical threats, they weren't real. They were jokes, Peter. It wasn't bad, Peter. I didn't beat you up. I only almost did. Why are you turning it into some big deal, Peter? Stop being so dramatic, Peter. Get out of here with this trash book. It's terrible attempt at, I don't know, nuance. It's awful. I hate it. This run tries to add that nuance to them, and it has that layer of darkness to it, and I think I know why this reason is so embedded in the darkness. This era happens after Frank Miller's Daredevil. A long story short, it was a mature book dealing with mature subjects. There was a darkness and a cynicism in that was executed better than anything before it. It's a classic, and you must read. You can really feel the effects of Miller and Jensen's Daredevil. All other writers and artists started to strike towards that, and Spider-Man is no different. Two of the books have a different focus, which is fascinating as it's two different ways to approach darkness. Amazing Spider-Man is more focused on Peter Parker's character, and the bigger plot going on with Flash, Hobgoblin, Rose, and all of that. It's the blockbuster book. Spectacular is a bit more smaller scale with more focus put on individual stories, and most importantly, it's focused on the larger concepts exploring themes of gun violence, youth crime, revenge, hatred of women, all these serious topics, and that Mantlo and Stern played around with, but David goes so much harder on. And I appreciate it, seriously. Peter David's Spectacular Spider-Man is one of the best runs of the character with real literary merit. Like, it's genuinely really good. Many runs have destroyed Peter's life over the years, Wolfman, Wells, Clone Saga, but Black Costume Era is so far the best iteration of this. Peter struggling with all this pressure, and we eventually get him even quitting being Spider-Man. Again, this run does have kind of repetitive ideas. This is like the 6th time he's done this, but it's really earned, and you kind of understand it. I will allow it for one more time. I'm very tired of it, but this might be my favorite take on this story, so it buys it a little bit of that leeway, and it's much longer than it, so it's a little like, again, but maybe one more time. I think I like this even more than Spider-Man No More, so that's just, how much does the repetition kill it? I don't know. It's a little hard to judge. And realistically, the average person at the time had not read all the stories leading up to it, so can you blame it? Yeah, I don't know. It's a bit much, but I like it. Now, this is a dark run, but good things still exist, and that's what really makes it work. We get proper MJ content here as one of the most iconic couples in comic book history rekindle their love. It's sweet. Once again, MJ helps Peter through his darkest times. They obviously have perfect chemistry, but what really sells them together as a couple is their journey together. They experience these events together and they, grow together. MJ helps Peter moving on when he doesn't have the strength to do it alone. Whether that's when Gwen passes during Conway's run or when he's faced with impossible choices here. Knowing how hard Peter takes these things, the man needs this, let's be honest, we've seen how he handles this and it's not good. MJ knows about the superhero life, so there's no need for hiding. It feels incredible, it's super satisfying to finally see him get the support he deserved. It's rough, but it's enough. But that's not all. What truly great relationship is, it's a two-way street. And this is the final thing that really makes MJ stand out and makes her just the best. MJ has her own troubles with her family. These writers treat her like a real person, a real character with an actual story. Oh my god! Shockingly rare in a series where she could easily be considered to be top 5 of the most important characters to come out of it. She has her own demons, and Peter helps her get over those scars. He helps her confront her sister and father and helps her be free from that guilt. Peter and MJ become the best versions of themselves because of each other. They need each other. Slowly over time they have proven they love each other over and over and over again. When it really matters, they are there for each other. They grow, and that's what makes the relationship feel so real. I love it. I love it so much. Spider-Man is really a book that needs a strong supporting cast, and this run delivers. But you know what they say? The hero's only as good as their villains, so how are the baddies? In order to push the good guys so hard, the villains are more dangerous this time around. Like, I say that every time, but it's like, I don't know. It's true. Peter's now dealing with a new bad guy, the Rose, who's another identity mystery. And then there's Kingpin and Foreigner scheming on the side. This era has a big push for the grounded level gangs. Most of the villains are either bosses or working for the boss. The villains feel like professionals, like there's a whole like hierarchy to things with the different levels of authority. I don't know, I like it. It feels more real, tangible. You kind of understand how this world works. Hobgoblin is working for the Rose as a glorified henchman, but knowing Hobgoblin, I'm sure that's probably just some scheme to eventually take over his empire. A Chekhov's goblin, if you will. But that's not all. Spider-Man gets to fight godlike beings for variety's sake. Beings like the Beyonder and Firelord, and fighting the living spirit of vengeance, Zarathos. As I understand it, this guy is supposed to be the spirit of vengeance behind Johnny Blaze, the Ghost Rider, if I'm understanding correctly. Very cool. Well, even Nightmare makes an appearance in Web of Spider-Man issue 7. Nightmare! These are odd choices, and the way they're used is excellent. Nightmare and Beyonder are not physical obstacles, they're unbeatable, so Spider-Man has to use his cunning. Except against Firelord, there Spider-Man just cheats and takes him out with brute force. That kind of goes against the point of these stories, but I don't think he should be able to do that. It kind of comes across like Firelord should be bigger than Spider-Man, but then again, I don't really know who Firelord is, so I don't know, maybe it's possible. Whatever the deal is, the villains do a lot to make the run feel fresh. Some villains like Puma make things personal by figuring out Spider-Man's real identity, forcing him to deal with Puma out of costume. Hobgoblin is during this era clearly the main nemesis. Sometimes I forget this guy was in the running for Spider-Man's arch-villain. Like, I don't know, like it's just weird to say, but it's genuinely tangible here. Then there's Sin Eater, a dude with a gun. I hate him, I hate him, I hate him. Amongst these villains are some normal people too. In some issues, the villain will be a child whose powers get out of control, or there will be some thugs who have no powers who target the elderly. One of my favorite issues is Spectacular issue 121, Eyewitness. Peter, MJ, and Jameson get stuck in a bank robbery, and we get to see all three retell what happened from their perspective. The villain is just some dude robbing a bank, and it's fantastic. The issue instead focuses on how people perceive Peter and Spider-Man. Jameson talks about taking on this psychotic robber and saving the day, while MJ makes Spider-Man more vengeful. Then we get the truth, which of course Peter can never truly share without ruining his secret, so he just has to watch everyone get mad at him, and all he can do is wonder how Robertson is the most lovable character in the series. Like, these issues don't always really need strong villains, like they just focus on characters now. This would not have happened during the Ditko days, so it's really interesting to see how far we've come. The biggest villain of the run? Peter's moral responsibility. This run tests Peter's ethics by forcing him to ask himself if he really has that obligation to save literally everyone. Like, I understand saving people, but like, everyone? Punisher goes after mob bosses, and Spider-Man is forced to ask to himself if it's good to stop that. They're, gangsters. If he stops the Punisher, a gang war will ensue and kill far more people. They will, be gangsters and run this whole, system of evil stuff. So, I don't know, maybe a rocket launcher to the face isn't such a bad thing. A villain will fall off the building. Spider-Man catches her, but this puts him at risk to be attacked by others because he can no longer defend himself. Lucky for him, it's just the X Factor, but still, he could have died for someone who was attacking him. Sin Eater is attacked by a mob. Is it really a bad thing to leave him to them? He deserves it, doesn't he? And it's not just these moral dilemmas that challenge Peter, it's the heat of the moment actions. Sin Eater fires a shotgun into a crowd. Spider-Man dodges the shot, so it hits the man behind Spider-Man, killing that guy. It's an impossible situation. Either he gets shot or the guy gets shot. Nobody can blame Spider-Man for dodging or not realizing what's gonna happen, but it will still haunt him. This is the price of being a hero. This is something that the cop characters relate to. Because this is a real thing you have to face. There is no third option. There is no easy way out. There is no just try harder. Sometimes things just don't work out. When faced with these hard situations, Peter has to ask himself if he has it in him to endure it. Why is it his responsibility to suffer for the world? Peter decides ultimately he doesn't want to do this anymore. He sees gangs fighting and swings away. If I ran away, you wouldn't judge me. Why is it so wrong Spider-Man not to care? He sees woman kidnapped on TV and decides not to go help her. Why it must be him and not cops? Is it really fair to ask him to do that? This run's take on Spider-Man is borderline out of character because he does leave people to die. There's the Daredevil thing. When the mob goes after Sin Eater, Daredevil goes to stop that mob and Spider-Man just says yeah, not my problem. Good luck, Daredevil. They're tearing you apart. He ultimately goes to save him, but it's that's a weirdly close call. But I think it ultimately works out for the character. Frenz is the lead artist for Amazing, and his style harkens back to Steve Ditko with a thin design for Spider-Man, 9-panel grids, even more panels. And it seems the writing kinda does too. This era acts more like the Ditko version. It's one of the most Ditko-esque versions. Peter has had his moments of anger, but this feels harder to me. It feels odd coming off Roger Stern's unfathomably based Chat Peter, but to be fair, the writers do take their time with it. It didn't happen in a single issue. The run doesn't start with oh, did you know Peter's, leaving Daredevil to bite it? It's no. His bitterness is slowly built up to, and his frustrations are honestly kind of fair. A big turning point is the death of Gene the Wolf. That will throw anyone off, so it works well. That's his friend, and he gets betrayed. It's this constant barrage of pure, which is enough to justify Peter's arc. Okay, so that was a lot, I know, but at least there's something new to focus on this time, because we got an entirely new book for this era. Amazing is focused on Peter Parker and the big plot. It's the blockbuster you'd expect. Spectacular is more focused on politics and character work. Then there's Web of Spider-Man. Unless I'm mistaken, Web of gives us our first female writer for Spider-Man, Louise Simonson. Her first issue was Marvel Team-Up Annual number 7 in 1987, and she also wrote Spider-Man Annual 19. And now, a year later, she gets to launch Web of Spider-Man with the first 3 issues. She does well enough writing some good Aunt May and Peter work and creating the villain team Vulturians, but it is her first issue that has left a mark on the series, as that's the one where Peter fights the symbiote, and you get the iconic church bell scene that has been adapted numerous times. You have seen it, definitely somewhere. Her and the artist Lacroix managed to leave an impact with that issue. For somebody who only did a little bit, good for her. While Spectacular ponders on the nature of crime in society and Amazing is ruining Peter's life, Web of the spin-off reads more like the classic Spider-Man books with less overarching narratives and more shorter 2 to 3 issue stories where Peter fights Vulture, Doc Ock, and the like. It's classic Spider-Man lighter in tone with less consequences. Every few issues the creative team changes, so the book has a good variety of stories. It's a little unfocused, I would say. It's even less important to this era than the other 2 books, but there are a few important arcs you should read, even if you're planning on skipping as much as possible. For example, Spider-Man is beefing with the Beyonder, and a big reason for that is in Web of Spider-Man, where Beyonder turns a building into gold. It collapses under its own weight, so Spider-Man spends an issue going through the rubble saving people. It's a great scene akin to something like Ultimatum. I love these types of Spidey stories. It really makes you feel like the friendly neighborhood part of him, the big characters causing havoc, and Spider-Man just goes down to the ground with the people, helping them. In this case, Spidey fails to save some people, which is why he's almost okay with Puma murdering Beyonder in Amazing. It's a crucial piece, and it's a great piece. All 3 books create one cohesive whole before you could skip Marvel Team-Up. Web of? A good chunk of the book has nothing to do with the main series, but parts of it? Yeah, 100% essential, I believe. All 3 books have this where is Spider-Man thing going on, and if you want to know what all that's about, it's only explaining Web of. It's a little annoying, to be honest. Then there's this plotline where Spider-Man steals a little piece of gold from the Golden Building. Nobody will care, nor will anyone miss it. It wasn't gold before, it's literally turned to gold by God. It's still stealing though, because it's not his. So our forever broke Peter has to ask himself if he's willing to steal the thing to pay his bills. Even if there's no harm done, will he do it? Honestly, it's an interesting question. He ponders on it for a long time because Peter is still a good boy at his heart. And I think as a fan, it's a very interesting question. But in this area, as the financial troubles escalate, he sells the thing. He actually sells the thing in Web of Spider-Man issue 15. Peter Parker stole and sold it, and he benefited off of stealing. An immense piece of character wars you'd miss if you don't read Web of Spider-Man. Seriously, don't skip it. It's definitely worth a read. It's interesting. Okay, so you got 3 books, all doing a different thing. Whatever you like, this era's got. Honest question, Which type of Spider-Man do you prefer? If you read this era, which one tickled your fancy? If you haven't, what kind of Spider-Man is for you? I think it's an interesting thing because they are trying to give everybody something. For me, it's probably Spectacular. That is my favorite here. Peter David absolutely nails it, I feel like. The writing is funny, heartfelt, he writes themes really well. It's nutty how good the story can be. My favorite story of the entire era might have been Death of Gene the Wolf, of course, but he also makes a kind of a little sequel to it in issue 113, Mayhem. The issue puts focus on Ernie, who is Aunt May's friend, who gets mugged, begins to carry a gun to give himself a sense of safety. He ends up getting jumped again. What are the odds? But this time, he has the gun, so he shoots the attackers, which he regrets it. Mayhem explores his guilt over shooting someone. He resents the idea of this being justice. Then there's Nate. The hooligans attack him, so he gets someone shot and he has zero regrets about it. He does what Spider-Man wanted to do in the Sin Eater arc. Aunt May, the most important person in Peter's life, rejects Nate over this. They break up over this. The story is about the larger concept of justice based on revenge and public safety and all this kind of stuff. Aunt May rejects vengeance and ultimately rejects Nate. The story, I think, is calling out Peter on his stuff. How low he's falling, how he's struggling. And, Aunt May is the moral compass here. They are regular people, and it's very justified why they feel angry. Anyone can feel that rage, you just gotta try to fight it. I think the book is trying to argue for, not shooting people, but it's very mature about it, letting you decide how you feel about it. Aunt May is Peter's heart. She's why he's Spider-Man in the first place. So seeing her reject this ugly path, it hits, It reminded me of Spider-Man 3, where Peter takes out Sandman and then brags to his Aunt May about it. It's heart-wrenching to see Aunt May, one of the purest characters in the series, react to this stuff. Genuinely, I think one of the best issues of Spider-Man I've read. I think it's up there with all my all-time greats. I think it's genuinely one of my all-time favorites. Spectacular goes small, but Amazing is the one that goes big. In order to be more epic, this era creates a new type of story entirely. This era gives us our first events. This era begins with Secret Wars. That's where Spider-Man gets the symbiote, but oh no, we're not done. This is then followed up by Secret Wars 2. Because yes, there was a second one. The Secret Wars 2 revolves around the Beyonder, basically God coming down on Earth to learn what it means to be human. There's like 8 issues of Spider-Man centered around this story. It's a lot. It's a big chunk of the book. Beyonder will test Spider-Man's resolve by putting him against the living spirit of vengeance to see if he can break Spider-Man's will. He torments Spider-Man with visions of his past failures like Uncle Ben, Gwen, and all the obvious ones you know. Then there's this issue where Puma tries to kill the Beyonder and Spider-Man tags along, and he has to ask himself the question, is he okay allowing a man to be murdered if he saves the universe? This run really digs deeper into Peter's psyche, and I appreciate it. This might be one of the most illuminating eras for Peter Parker's character. Secret Wars 2 is used to confront Peter's morals. It's hard to judge him when literal gods are toying with him, like literally. Beyonder and Mephisto, man, that's rough. Like a literal god and the devil decided to ruin Spider-Man's day. I feel bad for him. My boy suffers too much. That's 2 events, but wait, there's more. Marvel invented events, and in a year or so, Marvel's already running rampant with them. This era culminates in a pseudo Spider-Man event, Gang War. I don't know if it officially counts as an event, but it definitely feels like one. With all the plot lines culminating, Peter has to make one final choice if he's gonna be Spider-Man. He tries to ignore all the gangs fighting, but in the end, he can't stay out of it and chooses to be Spider-Man because, power, responsibility, you know the deal. The biggest mysteries are getting answered. Who is the Rose and who is the Hobgoblin? We got Jack-O-Lantern, Rose, Hobgoblin, Foreigner, Punisher, Daredevil, Falcon, Hammerhead, Black Cat. We're all in, baby. Everyone's here. Even if you don't count Gang War as an event, it's got the swagger of one. It's for most part an enjoyable story, and although it's not as good as I kind of wanted it to be, I love this era for most part, but Gang War? This is where the cracks begin to show and the fall off begins. It gets a little too silly at times. If you read it, you know what time it is. It's issue 4 time. In issue 4, Kingpin returns to New York after being absent for a while. Spider-Man hears about it and interferes, and he attacks Kingpin. He straight up rips off Kingpin's face. But wait, what's this? It's Daredevil in a fat suit. Daredevil pretended to be Kingpin so everyone would attack him, so the real Kingpin can enter NY safely elsewhere. Why did it need to be Daredevil? Why would Daredevil agree to this? What is this? Like, wasn't there an easier way to do it? Why not just send like 3 cars or something? This is stupid. Also, they fight, and because of course they do, and Falcon and a few others are standing on this to the side. Like, they don't do anything, they're just kind of there to make the story feel bigger. It's kind of funny, honestly. Gang War is followed up by spin-off graphic novel, Spider-Man vs. Wolverine. And it might sound like a regular team-up, but trust me, it is not a Marvel team-up book. It's crucial. You have to read it immediately following Gang War. I like all these books, but man, keeping track of them is painful. During this story, Spider-Man and Ned Leeds and Wolverine end up tracking a KGB agent, Charlie, to Berlin. Peter goes off with Wolverine and, to do their thing. When he returns to Ned, Ned's already dead. Ned Leeds is killed off screen by unknown characters. It's a weak death, as we don't get any build up to it. It happens out of nowhere, no final conversation between these two who've been longtime work friends and rivals, and they fought each other and nothing. It's weak stuff, but okay, Ned's a goner, anticlimactic, and I hate it, but okay, we're for some reason doing this. There's this one page of Peter struggling with the guilt over his failures. He believes he took the wrong action and ends up getting people killed. And it's a great page, contrasting with Wolverine's stoicism. It's not all bad. For most part, I would say I actually like their story. I like Wolverine here, he's super cool. I like the Cold War era Germany as the setting, and I do like the spy stuff. I'd say I like the first 90% of the book, and I do, except for like the Ned Leeds stuff. I liked even like the idea of the ending. The end, it's a little too like emotional, I don't know, a little over the top with the narration. The ending leads to Wolverine and Spider-Man fighting, and Peter realizes he can't beat Wolverine due to Wolverine's adamantium, so Spider-Man considers killing Wolverine by either choking him or snapping his neck. Like, he literally grabs Wolverine by the neck. This is straight up out of character, and it's terrible. I reject it. There's a difference between straight up murdering someone like this and allowing a god who threatens to destroy the universe to be killed. Spider-Man trying to ignore a gang war isn't the same as snapping Wolverine's neck. I can accept those first ones that happen. It's a questionable one, but I can accept it after enough build up and character work. This story, the way it's written, no, it's way too much. I don't know. No. Spider-Man has already learned not to go down this path. I hate it. It's like, no, we shouldn't be doing this. It might be even enough to ruin the book for me. Why is he complaining about not wanting to be Spider-Man? You already chose to be him. Bro, you finished that arc. Volby leaves and Spider-Man becomes distracted. He hears Wolverine sneak up on him. For around 2, Spider-Man turns around and punches him hard. Oh, it wasn't Wolverine, but Charlie. This is Spider-Man's first canonical kill. I like this idea as this plays into the themes of the era, the cost of heroism, right? Just like Scene Leader, you can't always make the right move. You can't blame him, it's an accident. And you have to be able to live with something like that. Spider-Man didn't mean to, and it kind of ruins him. And this is a little minor, but I feel like this is also kind of wrong. Spider-Man punches her with a punch meant for Wolverine. She shouldn't have a head anymore. And yet she takes this punch and then just has a conversation with Wolverine before biting it. Like what did she die of exactly? Like, she should have died instantly from a punch like that. She would have been vaporized. That punch should have gone through her. I'm not a doctor. Maybe it all checks out. Like, I don't know. But the delivery of the specific death feels a little contrived and just feels off. That's how I describe this whole thing. All the narration, all the Ned Leeds stuff, the Wolverine stuff, the Charlie stuff. I like it, like the idea, and I like parts of it, but it's overall just off. But to be fair, there's 2 positives that I am very happy with. Spider-Man keeps replaying this moment in his head. We get the same panel over and over and over again as it haunts Peter all the way home. It's a beautiful visual, and it hits hard. I love this little, aftermath. The other positive is that many decades later, in I believe 2019, Marvel released Marvel issue 1000. I don't know how they counted this as issue 1000, but whatever. It's a collection of 1-page long short stories, and they are set around all of Marvel's history, starting from First Human Torch all the way to 2010s. I do recommend checking it out, as there are some real standout short stories in there, especially related to Spider-Man. All the Spider-Man ones are just great. The one that's relevant here is this one, Jet Lag. it's just this one page, so I'm showing you the entire thing. I don't think Marvel's cool with that, but hey, I won't tell if you won't. This one's just a beautiful addition to the narrative, and it's worth adding to the reading experience. If you read this like this era, I suggest reading this one too. All the Spider-Man stories are great in Marvel issue 1000, so check it out for more stuff. It's great. Okay, this has been a lot building up to this final Hobgoblin thing ever since Stern. I don't like talking about the behind the scenes stuff for these videos. I like letting the stories speak for themselves, but in this case, it's really hard to ignore the behind the scenes stuff. Hobgoblin was created by the previous amazing writer, Roger Stern. Stern planned for Hobgoblin to be Roderick Kingsley. Stern's very first issue in Spectacular Spider-Man sets up Kingsley's motivation as he's humiliated because of Spider-Man. He yells at Spider-Man's face so that it's very clear, and issue or two later we see this mysterious man seething about Spider-Man. This is probably Kingsley. He then discovers Green Goblin's hideout. He steals the Goblin tech and takes his revenge. The only wrinkle in all of this is in the final story where Kingsley is in the same room with the Hobgoblin, but by this point, there's been like 1 or 5 fake Hobgoblins, so it really is like not disapproving anything. There's like literally a fake robot Hobgoblin in the same exact issue, like 2 pages earlier. Stern's idea was that Roderick Kingsley had a brother who would dress up and then they'd show up in the same place at the same time. It's a little much, but as far as comic books go, I think it's set up well enough. Like, the brother is even mentioned during the run, so I think I can live with that. I can accept it. I think it's a fine answer. The problem arrives as Stern left the book. So Tom DeFalco takes over and decides he doesn't like the Kingsley death twist, so he changes the identity to Alexander Fisk, a Kingpin's son. This is not set up at all, and this is much worse, but it's not terrible per se. I think I can live with that. That's the mediocre answer. Now we get to the relevant part. DeFalco did not get along with his new editor, Jim Owsley. The two seemed to hate each other, honestly. DeFalco lied to his boss and told him Ned Leeds was gonna be the Hobgoblin. Like, I don't know, like, in case he was gonna get fired or something, he gave Owsley the wrong story. So then DeFalco does get fired during Gang War. Owsley steps in as the writer for the last few issues of that. You know, like, you can kind of feel that. It's like, you know, it kind of gets a little weaker, so it's like, you know, what do you know? It's almost like the writer left. It's then revealed the Rose is Alexander Fisk, and the Hobgoblin is Ned Leeds. The reason why this is relevant is because Ned Leeds is a terrible reveal. I think goes against Ned's character. It's boring as it's the third time someone Peter knows becomes a goblin. It's a trend. I can accept everyone before this. With Ned, it started to become a little repetitive, you know. I think Ned's role was originally to be a cool dude. He's essentially the original Paul, but not terrible. This destroys that, and to be fair, Ned's being on a spirals is like Wolfman decided to ruin him and Betty. I hated that too because it felt cheap. We didn't get to see Ned's fall, like how did he turn into this monster? It's retroactively explained a little bit in Web of Spider-Man, but it still feels a little cheap. Okay, let's break this down a little bit. The other problem is just how convoluted the finale is. Like, I'm gonna get really passionate about this. This robs the story from all the catharsis a good reveal should have. First comes Spider-Man vs. Wolverine. What happens after? Well, Spider-Man gets his hand on a file that reveals to him the truth. Ned Leeds was the real Hobgoblin all along. Like, he just reads it from a paper. It's a very unsatisfying way to do that. And then he just imagines Ned Leeds, like, in a scene. And then he dies 2 seconds later in a super pathetic death to some no-name grunts with the worst outfits I've ever seen. Like, seriously? These are the outfits you came up with? During the 80s, the years of cool. Like, this is the year Storm was in a mohawk. It's bad. And Ned Leeds, for now, seems to be really dead. The great nemesis of the decade, the villain running for the title of Arch-Villain, died off screen to no names? Like, what is this? I hate it. All this time, you've been building this guy as this great villain, this great mystery, and in the end, we don't even get a fight, no confrontation or nothing. The best parts of these personal betrayals are the confrontations. In Sonic, Spider-Man has the twist of spoilers. Octavius is actually Doc Ock, and we get this scene on a skyscraper where Peter is yelling his lungs out of the Doc, and Ock is excusing his madness, and it's all super emotional and great. It's the best lines in the game. You think we would get that with Hobgoblin, but no. Green Goblin got that multiple times. We do get a fight scene as a new Hobgoblin arrives even before Ned's funeral. Jack-o'-lantern. Jack Maskindale takes over the title. The epic final fight of this era is with Jack-o'-lantern Jack-o'-lantern. I swear when I read this issue, I would have thrown my phone across the room if I wasn't broke. The scene that takes place in multiple areas, in pitch darkness, in heavy rain, Spider-Man goes shirtless for maximum epicness. All this would have been so good if the fight was with, you know, Hobgoblin, the real one. Man, this story sucks. Just to twist the knife, Maskindale flies off to fight another day, so he's not even captured. This isn't even the end, I guess. Like what, did the writers think I'm interested in a second saga after all that? No thanks. This story is the first time I've been this frustrated since Wolfman. If only DeFalco had finished the run. But then again, maybe this story isn't what ruined the Hobgoblin. Maybe the Hobgoblin was already ruined before this. Big part of Hobgoblin's appeal was his constant growth. He starts out with nothing, then he finds the goblin tech. He gets whooped, so he gets superpowers. He's almost caught, so he starts using body doubles. Every time you see him, he gets smarter and more dangerous. What made him intriguing, at least to me, is the constant question, how high will this guy climb? You want to see this guy climb high and climb until he reaches his potential. That to me was as intriguing, if not more intriguing, than the identity reveal. But during DeFalco's run, he kind of stops climbing altogether. He starts working for the Rose, and I assume that's just a ploy. He's gonna hijack Rose's empire at the end or something like that, but no. He's just a grunt and seems to have no greater plan. He talks about plans, but there is nothing really happening here, nothing interesting. There is no smart twist, no ambitious plays. He stopped climbing higher. DeFalco's run decided this is all he is. And the moment the question of how high is answered with a disappointing glorified right-hand man, the character died. I didn't realize it until the final stretch because I kept on hoping that there's something better, but he's really been a stale character before this. Unless DeFalco had something really big and awesome planned, we will never know, I guess. As it stands though, I can only judge the final result, which is why I don't really worry about the behind the scenes stuff too much, but I don't think the run before this knew how to use him correctly. Unless there was a mother of all twists waiting. I think Hobgoblin climbed during Stern years and then stopped. And I believe that is what truly killed the Hobgoblin. I'll argue any day of the week, Hobgoblin was one of the best Spider-Man villains of all time. A writer like Stern had something far more interesting planned, something more inspired, and I truly believe if Kingsley had been revealed to be the Hobgoblin, I think he would still be an A-tier character. Had the finale been a fight with an actual guy you were building up for a decade, I think I would have been happy. I believe this mess ultimately genuinely did manage to ruin one of Spider-Man's greatest villains. It's a shame. The black costume will stick around a little longer, but there is a major shift after this. After Gang War closes, we get an MJ trilogy with issues 290, 291, and 292. After the most exhausting marathon of Peter's life happens the biggest shift in Spider-Man's life and the book's history. It's big enough for the all-time great John Romita Sr. to come back to do this one last story. As Spider-Man's hanging about, doing his thing, after everything that happened, after all that unfairness, after gods and this little tried to ruin his life, he takes a moment to reflect on things. I'm happy. Blasted, I'm happy, happy, happy. I mean, after all these years resenting my double life of swearing to give up my costume and be plain old Peter Parker, I finally accepted myself as Spider-Man. I should be content. So why do I feel like I'm being pulled into more directions? I feel hollow, incomplete. And that doesn't make sense. There's still something missing in my life. He saves today, but that's not it. He goes to his apartment, but it's empty. He goes to Aunt May, but that's not it. What Peter truly wants, he ultimately lands on Mary Jane. Peter finally proposes to MJ. The editorial will seethe about that. MJ struggles with the decision as she still has her own demons to deal with. This story centers around her. She has to confront her terrible father and her sister. It's a bit difficult to read. It's uncomfortable to see a victim confront her family and try to make amends to the people she hurt. She can't deal with all of this alone, so she asks Peter for help. Alistair Smythe attacks New York at the same time, forcing Peter to once again choose between MJ and New York. Peter chooses to save MJ and leaves the city with a villain on the loose. As he puts it, New York has cops, firemen, even National Guard. Mary Jane only has me. He's not tortured, nor is he selfish. He's mature with a healthy boundary between his own life and Spider-Man-ing. It's cool to see. He even teaches MJ about the danger of too much sacrifice. It's really cool to see. MJ gets to be part of the action, ramming a car into Spider Slayer, and when that doesn't work, she attacks it with a bat. God, she's awesome. With Peter's help, MJ remembers all her past and lays it all to rest. Finally free from it, she accepts Peter's proposal. Both have become more mature people. They have faced their demons, and after everything, Peter Parker has found his heart again. And that little piece of happiness is enough to make it all worth it. This is why I believe MJ is such a crucial part of Spider-Man. MJ represents the future. Spider-Man is a story about rebuilding yourself after losing, moving on from the past. That's what the costume represents. Peter improving himself. He chooses to become a better person. MJ is the next step after that in reinvention, because you can never stop reinventing yourself. You always have your ups and downs, but every single time you can and you must always move on. To me, MJ represents all of that. And to me, that's why Peter and MJ are perfect for each other. She has to come next so there can be a future. Peter Parker and Mary Jane get married in annual issue 21. What comes after? They return home, and what follows must be happily forever after, right? After this point, David Michelinie graduates to lead writer of Amazing with an interlude from J.M. DeMatteis' Craven story. How does the talk about marriage go? I guess we'll see soon enough.